recognized like the term loyalist and patriot from before? Were these terms new to anybody? If they were, that's fine. Okay, good. Patriot, you see that word pop up a lot, especially during like 9/11, it kind of resurfaced. We've been using it a lot ever since then. For example, we have a couple of sports teams in the United States, right? They're the Patriots, like that's their mascot. We've had movies come out that have Patriot in the title, one called The Patriot, right, with Mel Gibson, it's about the Revolutionary War and all of this stuff. So anyway, so these are the two major groups during the Revolutionary War. The Loyalists, who were the people that were still supporting Great Britain, still supporting the king. What would have been a benefit of staying a loyalist during this time?
Would you be scared that the monarchy would like hurt you or execute you transporting you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously, you know, people are choosing which side they're on before the war is occurring. So, you know, they might have been afraid that if they moved away from Great Britain, if Great Britain had won the war, you know, they might have punished the dissenters, right? The people that disagreed with the major government. So, good. What's another reason for being a loyalist?
Because the thing about a lot of loyalists living like away from the cities, and so they weren't aware of like the reasons for a lot of the colonists deciding to be revolutionaries, and just so it didn't affect them as much, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't recognize like how much influence the British really had on the colonies. Good. Maddie, what else?
I think it also said that they were like governors and like lawyers of Britain, so
Yeah.
they felt like more of a connection.
Yeah, and they had something in it for themselves, right? They benefited by supporting the British government. Okay, good. All right, and then obviously the Patriots were the people that were in favor of breaking apart from Great Britain and becoming independent, our own independent country and independent states. So up until this time, we're not states yet, we're still colonies, meaning that we're still under the rule of another country. That's the exact definition of a colony, right? You're under rule of another country. Okay, good. Let's see here, and I have another question for you. Let's see. Okay, so we have the two major groups, but then there are a lot of people that either fell in the middle, there were some groups that didn't choose sides. What did the Native Americans tend to do? Who did they side with and why? Aaron?
I believe most of the Native Americans sided with Great Britain during the Revolution.
Yeah, you're right, at least at first. Why? Why would they have done that, Aaron?
Because Britain didn't seem like a threat to them more than the colonists.
Yeah, the colonists were of course a threat to them, right? They're taking over the Native American land and you know, enforcing all these rules and forcing them to change their way of life. Yeah, good. What about the slaves, the African American slaves? Who did they tend to side with? There was one specific thing. Great Britain promised the slaves something if they would come and be soldiers in their army. Yeah.
They promised them freedom.
They promised them freedom, yeah, which and it was a false promise in a lot of cases. But just kind of by coincidence, a lot of slaves ended up, you know, breaking free during the war, just because people were distracted with the war, right? So they were able to escape from plantations and head up north. So that was one of the benefits that came of this war, obviously, besides the major one, which is our independence. Okay, good. And then it talks about George Washington, right? Before he became our first president, he was a general of the Continental Army, which was the Patriot side, right? That's what they called the army. Saratoga is mentioned in here, and I think it's one of your identity terms. That was an important battle because it was the first major battle that we won against Great Britain, and so it goes down in history as being like kind of the shifting point for us for our win in the Revolutionary War. It also was important because the French saw how well we were doing with this victory, and they decided to step in and help us out. So the French sent over all of these extra troops and also their Navy fleet, which was able to help blockade the British to prevent them from coming over. and so eventually that's what led the Patriots to win. And the French throughout history kind of have a bad rap of being like a wimpy country. Like they tend to shy away from conflict and wars. So a lot of people make fun of them. But in this particular war, they really came through for us. So remember that the French, I'm of course a little biased, right, of course, but the French really helped us out. And did you guys all know that our Statue of Liberty came from France? It was a gift from the French. Yeah, they're the ones that had it built and sent over to us. So it's from France. And over in Paris, they have a little replica of it in one of their parks. It's really cute. I've seen it before. She's like more like life size, maybe 8 feet tall or something, but a tall life size lady. But anyways, okay. Valley Forge, which was another major point here in this section. This was where the Continental Army camped out during the winters of the Revolutionary War, and they had terrible conditions because they didn't have a lot of resources to start with. They didn't have a ton of ammunition or skilled soldiers like the British Army did, right? The British Army has been around for, 1,000 years, okay? Because Great Britain is an old country, just like all of Europe had existed for several hundred years before America even came into existence. So it was rough, and we have this famous picture, the painting of George Washington, like where they're on the boat and it's the icy river, right, and they're crossing over, and George has got the flag, and like it's very like patriotic. It's kind of a symbol of patriotism, right? So and that was on Christmas Day too. So they had to like trudge through the river, and it was just terrible. Okay, let's see here. Okay, good. So the next section then, does everybody have these copied? Great. Then we talk about how life changed for the colonists during the war. So we've got kind of 3 major things that changed in everyday life. So we'll make this our second major point here. A lot of you mentioned this in your paragraph too, this concept of inflation. And inflation basically just is something that happens. It's an economical phenomenon that happens when the value of our money drops. And so therefore the price of goods and services goes up, or rises. And that happens every once in a while, still depending on what's going on in the country. If we're in times of debt from war or something like that, generally our money will not be worth as much. And then since it's not worth as much, business owners will have to raise their prices on things so that they can afford to make a living. So the prices of everything go up. So this is what's known as inflation. So they had a ton of this going on, and obviously one of the lessons from this that we've learned and we keep relearning again and again throughout history is that war is super expensive. And it's expensive in a literal sense, right? It takes a lot of money and resources to have a war, but it's also expensive in a more abstract sense, right? What else does war cost us? Aaron?
Lives to be
Yeah.
besides.
Hundreds, thousands, millions of lives sometimes, right? Okay, good. What else does it cost us besides money? Aaron?
Maybe like land or territory, I guess, can sometimes cost us.
Yep.
Like who wants a property that's covered with, that was once a battlefield, I guess.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Or sometimes if we lose a war, then the opposing side will then be able to claim stake over our land that we once occupied. Okay, good. What other things do we lose when we have a war, Maddie?
I don't know if we lose this, but I guess like the population goes down and then
Yeah.
everybody, like the men come back and then we have like baby boomers or whatever.
Yeah, so it causes population shifts, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, my parents' generation, and your parents are a little young, they wouldn't be considered baby boomers, but like people in their like 50s and 60s, late 50s and 60s, those were the baby boomers, because after World War II, all of the men came back to their wives that they hadn't seen for a long time, and they made all of these babies, tons of babies, and so yeah, we had this drastic rise in the population during that time in like the 1940s, 50s, 60s. We had a ton of babies being born. It's really funny. Holly, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that,
Sure. So lots of negative things come from war, right? I kind of think that of all of the wars that we've had, though, like at least we're fighting this one with a good intention, right? Of gaining independence and of gaining equality for everybody. Holly?
maybe an alliance that we might have had with the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah, so it breaks or forms relationships, right? Okay, good, excellent. All right, so another thing that was going on then, daily life type thing, is that we have women participating in the war. Not so much that they wanted to, but they kind of had to. And we really didn't have women out working as soldiers and fighting in the battlefields, but we had women picking up the slack at home and at their husbands' jobs while they were away. And we did actually have some women go onto the battlefield and act as nurses and bring guys water and that kind of thing. I think in the book they mentioned Molly Pitcher, who was like the most famous lady during this during the Revolutionary War, and she would go out, she would take pitchers of water around to the soldiers that were wounded and that kind of thing. Okay, so the fact that we had women participating in the war, that creates a shift in our thinking during that time. And obviously it would be a really long time before women had any kinds of real rights. But it gave people something to think about, for sure. Oh, okay, women are capable of handling things. Does anybody know when women first were able to vote? It wasn't that long ago. Maddie?
I know it was like the 19th Amendment, and wasn't it in the 20s?
It was in the 1920s, yeah. So like 200 years after this, right? Well, almost 200 years after this. Okay. Okay. What about for African Americans? When was the Civil Rights Movement? 50s, 60s, 1960s? Yeah. Like your parents were alive then. It wasn't that long ago. Okay. Last thing here is that we've got our African Americans are fighting as soldiers, and also a lot of them, we'll just put the African American spot in war, and many escaped to freedom. And some African Americans were granted their freedom officially for having fought in the war. Some didn't. Some just became slaves again afterward. Okay, and then the last section talks about us winning the war. One of the major influencers of us winning the war was the Marquis de Lafayette. And as the name suggests, he was a French general that came over with the French army. So he did a couple things, but the main thing was to help strengthen our army here. Because he was a very experienced army general, so he knew what he was doing. Yorktown was another buzzword from this section. What happens at Yorktown? Why is that significant for US history? Aaron?
I believe, isn't it like where, George Washington and his men surrounded a British commander? And it would have been, didn't he like cause a lot of trouble for the Americans? What was his name? Charles Corn?
Yeah, Cornwallis, Cornwallis was the, I guess you'd call him the leader, basically, of the British, army. Yeah, he did, he caused a lot of trouble for us. Yeah, specifically at Yorktown, though, we did something.
We defeated the British.
Yeah, that was when we won, officially. And not only did we defeat the British, but they surrendered to us, which is even better, because like they submitted, and they're like, okay, we're done, you know, so we didn't have to like overtake them. They surrendered instead, which was great. They really didn't have a choice, but, okay. Yeah, so we'll just put here, British surrender. Okay, and so then, very last thing here, once the British surrender, we have to decide then what are we gonna do after the war? How are we gonna clean things up? What rules will be made? So now we're independent.
You skipped C.
Oh, thank you. So what we do is we get together with France, Spain, and Great Britain, because those were the four major powers during that time. And we all signed something together. Anybody remember what it was called? Aaron?
The Treaty of Paris.
There you go, good. Good, okay. What is a treaty? What's the definition of a treaty? Anybody know? Anytime that a treaty has been made in history.
It's like an agreement?
Yeah, exactly. It's an agreement, usually an agreement for peace, right? To keep the peace between, you know, two or more groups. Yeah, so it's an agreement, good. So the Treaty of Paris then basically gave us our official on-paper documented freedom. Okay, with certain stipulations, so it wasn't a perfect document, still had certain rules that we had to follow after wartime, but eventually those all kind of dissolved and we were able to make up our own system of rules and that kind of thing. Good. And then at the end of the chapter, it just kind of talks about how the Revolutionary War became this great symbol of liberty for our country and also for other countries. And later on in history, other countries will mimic our Revolutionary War. They will rebel against their governments to try to set up a better system for themselves. So, one last thing, we have the term egalitarianism, and that was one of your terms to identify. What does that mean? Paige?
Belief in human equality.
Yeah, yeah, good. So again, that's something that will have to reform throughout history, because at this particular time in history, it's really just talking about equality among white men, right? So the idea is that your worth as a human being is now based on like your abilities and your effort in life and the various things that you do, your characteristic, instead of which family you had come from or how much money you had had before. So, you know, but equal rights for, of course, women and other ethnicities wouldn't come until a lot later. Good, any questions at all? Okay, we'll go ahead and stop there, we've got a couple minutes left, but you're welcome to go ahead and get started on your assignment for Monday, or if you have something else to look over before your next class, you're welcome to do that. Maddie?
I actually do have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Like the city of Paris, when like all the different countries came together,
Yeah.
was that like did the UN like come from that idea?
Yes, eventually, yeah. So after all of the major war, I think the UN developed after World War I, so it wasn't until the 20th century. But yeah, same kind of idea. These major countries getting together and saying, okay, look, we'll support each other. You guys have this, you know, freedom now to do this. We have this authority, and everybody agrees. So it's always a non-violent pact, basically. Good question.
Would you like us to read Women in Political Power?
Oh, yeah.
What was the question?
The women in political power, yeah, just glance over. It's not very long. It's kind of like the little blurb that we read about the colonial courtship, right? Just kind of talks about various women and when they had the power to do certain things with politics.
back to tickets to Germany, that's
Okay.
okay.